right. Well, here we are in the end of February, a month away from Engage and a bunch of other events. We'll touch base on that. Thanks for everybody for coming out. Friday Live is the FM BetterForms community meetup. It's kind of our opportunity to give back to our amazing community we have here. Um, this week we have some interesting things. Andrew's going to be leading some stuff, and Pearson, our UX designer, as well. We'll be talking about offline apps and performance improvements and things. And we're going to sort of touch base lightly on that this week or this month. And I think if this seems like some interesting stuff, we'll dig in a little bit more, even more deeper in upcoming months as well. I want to touch base on some upcoming events that we have in our community, and there's sort of the next. There's one more actually that's scheduled for this year, but it's not on here yet. Engage Austin, that's coming up in March, and I noticed Julie Sigfrinius is going to be here, so I'm going to have her chime in just a second on that. We have Elevate FM, which is going to be a UX or is a UX, slightly more UX and quality of app type conference that's coming up in Toronto. That's a 1 day plus a training day. And that's hosted by FM Design University. And coming up in Vienna, Austria, is Vienna Calling, which is a continuation of .fmp. Egbert was decided not to continue with .fmp, which was a really, really successful kind of an unconference conference. It was originally a spawn of Pause on Air, and it sort of spun off a little bit in its own direction. It's a pretty unique conference if you get a chance. It's very technical, and it's pure technical stuff for the most part. So it's kind of the conference that everybody really, as an advanced developer, that everybody really likes. And then finally coming up, we're going to be sponsors of all of these events as well. But then finally coming up is Build, Grow, Learn. And this is a really different event. If you're a developer and you're a consultant and you're challenged by different things, like we're seriously challenged with lots of stuff, and it's a real big learning curve in terms of running the business and growing the business, past the 3 people and the 10 people and the 30 people and all those levels. This is a conference for you. It is not really about FileMaker specifically, but maybe a little bit about FileMaker and solving problems that are within a business to optimize workflows and things like that, but more so on how to structure your business. How do you create policies and processes? How do you hire people? How do you fire people? How do you manage accounting and taxation and things like that? So there's a lot of information in there. Even though we're located in Canada, this is an event that we're going to for our second year, and we're bringing extra people down just because we found it so valuable to us. So out of these events, if you're looking for something that allows your business to grow, that's definitely the one, because it's very, very like-minded people there. Julie, did you want to touch base and talk a little bit about Engage?
Sure. Thank you. Hello, everyone. We are, yes, as you mentioned, Charles, less than 30 days from Engage kicking off in Austin. The planning obviously is in high gear at this point, tidying everything up, but we're really excited. We are potentially looking to sell out again this year. The attendance has been wildly popular. After the holidays, I think everybody just kind of went, oh my gosh. And so registrations have been really, really good. The 6 classes that we're offering the day after Engage have exceeded what we did last year already in registrations. We had 4 classes last year. We're doing 6 this year. And it's a great way to kind of add the icing on top of the cupcake of Engage by doing that training. And so, it's all of the folks that you would expect. Chris Ippolate's doing an AI class. Todd Geis is doing an integration class. Wim is doing a server class. Alexis, who's with Elevate FM, is doing a design class. Martha and Sarah are doing the essentials. So if you're newer and just wanting to get your foundational knowledge of FileMaker, that's a great one-day class with Martha and Sarah. Bob and Ernest are going to do the essentials, like the staying current. What are the recent changes to Engage? And if you go back one step, Charles, I'm missing one person's class. Who did I miss? And scroll down there's a grid. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. And there's one more. There's the classes there. So I said, oh, I got everybody. Yeah, I think I got everybody that was on there. So there's still space in all of these classes, although the AI class and the integrations class are really close to getting full. And so I expect in the next week or so, they may be marked as full. We're going to have a lot of fun at Engage. Claris is right now on the calendar doing 6 sessions ourselves in addition to the keynote. Last week, we added 2 more, and those will go live next week. So we're doing 8 sessions plus a keynote. So we're actually putting one session over a lunch break just because we're trying to give as much knowledge as possible. And we're bringing tons of people, more than we did last year. We have a huge booth planned. We're really excited. And for fun, we've got a Claris museum, 40 years of history of FileMaker that will be at Engage. We have an expanded Claris Support Central, which has 4 different areas where you can block time, one-on-one time with an expert on a variety of different things. We've got 42 sessions, I think, total for the 2 days. We've got an after party that's going to be a blast with vintage arcades, think pinball and Miss Pac-Man and Mario and some fun stuff. We have, for the first time ever, a Claris merch store with our expo. So if you want to get some Claris merchandise, branded merchandise for Engage, we've got a whole bunch of stuff there. And then our closing reception is going to celebrate FileMaker's 40 years. And so we're going to have a little birthday party for FileMaker at our closing session. But all of our leadership will be in attendance. It's a great opportunity if you want to plug in and understand at the greatest level and degree about what Claris is working on, what our vision is, what our strategy is, where we're going and what we're focusing on. And at the same time, if you want to give us feedback, this is the place to do it. This is a great place to do it. And Charles is showing you our wonderful sponsors, of which FM BetterForms is one of them. And so we're very pleased to have a very lively expo hall, which is in the Executive Briefing Center this year, all on one level. It's going to be really, really, really nice. And so we are very much excited about our event. We invite, if you're not planning to attend, I would like to personally invite each and every one of you to consider it. It's going to be a great event this year.
Thanks, Julie.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the post conference talks, training sessions versus pre is so far successful.
So far, if we measure it by registration, it is more successful than last year.
Interesting.
So it's an experiment this year because traditionally we have done the training before and then everybody goes into Engage or previously DevCon. And last year we received feedback that some people said, gosh, after being at Engage, if I would have understood something, I would have attended that training because now I understand the context. And a light bulb kind of went off over some of our heads and we were like, well, who says the training has to be before? Why can't it be after? And so we're trying that as an experiment this year, and we'll gather feedback once it happens fully in retro on it, but so far so good.
I've noticed that it's a lot of the same people who go, and I don't mean this in a negative way. And what and maybe this is just a theory, but I think once people have gone once, then they realize like, holy cow, I don't want to miss this next year. Like I know for myself, I didn't go for the first, X amount of years. I was I almost went to one in Florida. I guess it was years ago, and maybe 2009 or something like that, somewhere
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, wow, I'm so close, and it's like right here next week. And I kicked myself in the butt for that, but I never positioned myself as a developer in my head. I didn't have this mindset that I should be taking part of this.
Yeah.
And I'm speculating there's a ton of developers that are out there that not realizing like, hey, you should be going to this. You have a lot to offer. You have a lot to learn. You know,
Yeah,
is
I
that is
appreciate
that the
that.
challenge here, do you think? Or
We track because when anyone registers for Engage, we invite every participant to fill in a profile because we want to know dietary restrictions and your t-shirt size and that kind of stuff. But one of the questions in the profile is this your first Engage or DevCon? Because we want to know. And I'll let this group know over 20% of our attendees this year are first time attendees. That is higher by a mile than what it traditionally has been.
Hmm,
So it's interesting. So we're actually doing some things for new to Engage to make sure we welcome these brand new attendees. Overall, though, I will say the mix of attendees, about half of them are in-house developers, or developers that I will call them, they're not part of the Claris partner program, which is fine. Not everyone has to be. And the other half are Claris partners. And that is normal. It's normal that we get about half and half. So that stat is staying consistent. But the new first timers is quite high this year, which is great. We're excited about that.
excellent. All right, super. Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Hassan, I believe, is ill today. He was normally going to give us a update, so I'll just give you kind of a verbal update here. I don't have an official list in front of me, just some things that are sort of in the pipes. We have a deployment coming out this either this weekend or in the next couple of days. That'll be an update. We've been previously, some of you guys have already been using our new version 3 of our editor, and that's been going well. We've added quite a bit of extra support. The version 3 was limited in some things, like, for example, you still had to manually manage a little bit of schema for tables and such. A lot of that has been addressed now, and our new version that's going to be coming out will take care of that. We've been seeing some performance issues with AI lately. Those are mostly been upstream. The OpenAI just, especially yesterday, just released a new model 4.5, and that particular model they is really, really resource intensive, and basically they partition or allocate resources to pro plan users rather than the API users, which is only about 10% of their revenue stream, from what I understand. So hopefully that'll stabilize. We've also done some other updates in order to give our community access to some newer technologies, especially the stuff that we're working on. We've always made those things APIs. So, for example, we've had a messaging API, notifications API. We have a now a real-time streaming API in BetterForms to allow for LLM streaming. Recently, Eduardo's just updated our LLM streaming API, and we're starting to make it multiple LLM company or supplier sourced, so that you can use other companies as well, not just OpenAI. Those should be probably rolling out in about another month in our base code or version 3 of our base code as well. If you are using the new editor, just a quick reminder, there is a notification that's in the app, but you'll have to use version 3 of our base code. If you have any problems or anything like that, we do want to hear your feedback on that. For the most part, the people we have onboarded, our new users to the platform, have had really good success with the drag and drop editor. And we have some other things. I can't talk about all of them just today, but we have some other new concepts and things like that we're going to introduce over the next quarter as well. But those are the main gist of updates there. I'm going to push Pearson back a little bit here.
Well, I'm
And
actually I'm ready now, Charles. If
oh, you good to go? All
yeah, I'm
right.
good to go.
So I want to pass this off to Pearson. Pearson's actually going to be talking at Elevate FM, the Toronto conference, coming up on May 26th. If you are in our community and you're coming out, let us know if you're going to be coming to that, and then maybe we can make up a separate meetup as well at the same time. We'll take you out to dinner or something, or you could take us out to dinner. That would be okay as well. And but Pearson's going to be talking there, so we're really excited about that. Pearson, I'll pass it off to you now.
Sure. Thanks, Charles. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Uh, So before I start, just I want to make a quick apology just for my voice. I'm still getting over a little sickness. I think everybody's kind of catching the bug. It's just going through all of Southern Ontario. I'm pretty sure. I know everybody um, has had a little something in the last week. But just want to thank everybody for joining us today for Friday Live. And yeah, like Charles said, I'll be uh, presenting something um, at in Toronto in May, and I'm really excited to try that out. So this isn't the presentation I'll be I'll be giving in May, but I want to just practice a little bit of my a little bit of the content that I'll be talking about, um, which is usability testing. So what I really want to get into is why usability testing matters and how you guys can do it yourselves on a small scale because not everybody has a UX team as part of their company. So you might be thinking that whatever you build works, so what's the issue? But what really matters is that the users can use it, not just you, the person who made it. Um, how users actually interact with your site is often very different than what you might expect. So let's dive into why user testing is crucial and how it can help you create more friendly user applications. So why should you user test? Obviously, you're not the user, like I said. People think differently. Everybody has different experiences, and we all interact with products in ways that maybe the person who created it doesn't expect. You also are able to catch usability issues before launch, making sure that everything works the way that a user would expect and not how a developer can accept. And by that, what I mean is, as a developer, you're using something, you're developing it, you're kind of in this world for a long period of time, and you learn the ins and outs. You understand that, yeah, it takes a couple seconds to load, but I'll just get used to it. Like I know that everything's working in the back. But from a user's perspective, especially someone who's using it for the first time, they don't know anything. And so what you're able to look past and accept and continue using might not be acceptable for someone who doesn't understand the full capabilities of what they're working with. Um, you want to just have a good impression for whenever anybody's using your product. You're also saving money and time on making these fixes. It's better to fix now than later. Just a quick, simple rule of thumb there. What are the risks of not user testing? Well, you can frustrate users, and sometimes they're or more likely not to return. No one likes to use software or products that don't work the way they expect it to. And I'm sure we've all had experiences with maybe software or products, and you're thinking, it should work this way. Why doesn't it work the way that I'm trying or the way that I'm expecting? And that creates frustration, and it might even turn people away completely from exploring your product even more. You might get an increase of bug reports, floods of reports of the same issue that you already know about. Like I know that this page takes a long time to load, or like I know that this button is uh, working only half the time. Um, or maybe you don't know that. So that's why user testing is able to weed out those issues and prevent these floods of bug reports. You also are at risk of losing revenue and losing engagement. If you have a subscription based service or something that has different tiers of subscriptions that you can pay for, if something is not working the way it is expected to, you're losing the incentive for people to upgrade. Maybe they're just getting by with the free version, and they're saying, it doesn't work great. I wish it did a lot more, or I wish it was a lot smoother, but I'll just get by with this free version plan, or I'll pay for the really low end plan just because I don't feel confident enough in this product to upgrade to the higher paid plan. So I want to talk about the different types of user testing. And so that comes in, there's a lot of different ways, but these are kind of some of the more top level fundamental methods of user testing. we have one that's just called usability testing, and that's where you're just watching real users interact with your product. That might be you standing in front of somebody on their laptop, or I've done it over Zoom a bunch of times where I'm talking to them on Zoom, I'm asking them questions, I'm having them share their screen so I can watch exactly what they're doing. We have A/B testing, and that is similar to usability testing, but you're comparing two different versions of a particular feature or page. And you're not necessarily comparing it between the same person. You're not showing someone A and B. More often, it's you're showing person one, version A, and person two, version B, and person three, version A again. And you're getting these unique experiences for every person that you're testing, and just comparing what is actually more effective. Is it the version A or is it the version B? Without getting people confused, using both A and B versions, and then they sometimes they don't give you the most honest feedback or the correct feedback. Next, we have surveys and feedback forms. Pretty basic. You're just gathering opinions directly from the users. That could be from a Google form, or just any other types of SurveyMonkey or whatever, and you're just asking them for their opinions, multiple choice, maybe a little open-ended questions, and just getting some data from the horse's mouth. Lastly, we have analytics and session recordings. So this is where you can actually see a user struggle in real time without them having the feeling of you watching over them. And so it's a little sneaky. It feels a little spyish, but there are services out there where you can have recordings of people using your product and without them really knowing. And you can go back, play back these clips or videos, and watch how people are using your software. Um, as they would in real life. So I'll go into a little more detail on each of these methods. So we have usability testing, and how it works is, as we see in this picture, you might have a user, or sorry, maybe like a UX person, or you as the tester. You're sitting down with somebody, putting them in front of a screen, some of the pages or features that you want to test and gather data on, and you're giving them a set of tasks. You watch them try to complete those tasks, and you take note of where they struggle, hesitate, or get confused. Usability testing is just watching or sorry, it's like watching somebody try to escape a maze that you've designed. Hopefully it's not a very complicated maze, but you'll quickly see where they get stuck. And this is one of the most powerful ways to uncover these hidden issues that users can get frustrated from. So you might have a workflow like on an e-commerce site. You might ask them, hey, can you pretend that you are a user? Like, this is what you might be saying to them. Pretend you're a shopper and you want to buy this laptop. Find this laptop, and you can give them like a model number or something, and add it to your cart and check out. And so you give them that basic instruction. Here's a task I want you to complete, and just let them kind of roam free, see what they're going to do. Some people, in that situation, you might be looking to see, are they trying to use the search feature? Maybe we have a search bar at the top, or is the person's first reaction to look on the side navigation? Maybe they're looking for categories or brands, and they're going to search by filtering the results. And so this way you're just kind of getting an understanding of how are these people trying to solve my problem, the problem that you've posed to them, which is just the task. Next, some A/B testing. How it works, you're creating two versions of a page. You show one to a user and track their performance, and you compare how both versions perform. And so like I said, you're giving person one version A, person two version B, person three version A again. And so here we have an example. This is just an example I picked off Google. So they're comparing these two versions. So they have a welcome to our site landing page. Um, and one of them, they have a blue learn button, or sorry, learn more button. And on the right, they have a green learn more button with an icon. And obviously, this is just a very standard example, not a real life example. But in this case, they're saying, this click rate with the blue button only had a 52% click rate, but we noticed a significant jump up to 72% click rate when we added an icon, changed the color. And so you might be able to infer different reasons for that change to have worked. You could infer, maybe the green is just a more popping color. It had more contrast and it got more people's attention. Maybe the button made it a little more enticing to click. Maybe it gave a little bit more information that made someone uh, want to click that button. Whatever the case is, you found that this version performs better than my last version. And so this could go for a landing page. It could be, you might be A/B testing. How fast does someone complete my workflow? Because this is something that I want to be efficient. So does it make, are people performing faster on this version, or are people performing faster on this version? And so in a situation like that, that's another reason why you're not comparing with one person both versions of your test, because your results could get skewed if they perform faster on A and then they take longer on B. Is that because B was slower, or is it because they just got used to using the A version first? So that, again, that's why, testing A B is usually not A and B for the same person. Takes a little more time, but you can gather, different insights from that. So these can be best for testing call to action placements, like we see here, the learn more button, trying different colors and wording, seeing what speaks to the user more. You can test for improving your conversion rates. How many times does someone proceed past this point? Um, and you can make more data-driven decisions. If you have a question, this is a good way to make a decision based on data that you've accumulated. Next, we have surveys and feedback forms. So obviously how this works, users fill out a short form about their experience, can be open-ended, could be multiple choice, might be an on-site pop-up, or even a post-interaction survey. So surveys are great for collecting feedback at scale. This is great for, sending it to a mass amount of people without having to, create appointments or scheduling issues. How much time do you have? Do you have 15 minutes to talk to me? 30 minutes here, is just a great way to get a lot of people's feedback in mass. They work best when they're short and targeted. If you ask 10 questions, most people won't finish, but a simple "how was your experience" with a 1 to 5 rating can still tell you a lot. I'm sure that we've seen "how was your service today." I've seen this at, airport bathrooms or like an A&W restaurant or whatever, and I've clicked it a couple times, mostly when it's been terrible and I want them to know, but uh, you know, a quick survey is a lot more enticing than a long survey. And sometimes you can even add an optional "what would you improve" box just to get some open-ended answers. If you have a question with, or sorry, a survey with more specific questions, at the very end, just ask them, what would you improve if you could do anything? And that's something that I like to ask at the end of my, in-person interactions with user testing. At the very end, usually I'll say something along the lines of, if you could improve anything, if you could change anything about this in an instant, what would that be? And that can give you some great golden insights. So these are best for understanding user satisfaction, gathering qualitative insights, and identifying recurring complaints. And lastly, to the analytics and session recording, I something happened. I guess it's not loading, but I had just an image of a like a heat map from a service like Full Story. But how these work is different ways of gathering or of viewing this data. But you might have like a heat map showing where users are clicking or where they're scrolling or what they're ignoring. You might be able to review and play back session recordings to show how users are navigating your site. And you can also sometimes find some drop-off analysis, finding out when users are leaving So these are really great points of data that you can gather, and they provide different insights for each of these tests. So a heat map, I think I had an image of it was like an e-commerce site. I think it was on mobile, just showing a heat map of where people are putting their fingers. So there was like a shirt, some pricing, navigation at the top, and um, I was making some inferences just from looking at the photo, but I noticed that everybody's touching the shirt, like they're tapping on the shirt, and I don't know what this system was, but to me that tells me either there is a way for you to swipe through photos, or maybe people want to click the photo and enlarge it, whether or not that was included in the app. That's something that I noticed just looking at a heat map, that maybe users are interacting, or how they're interacting with this screen. Um, uh, Sorry, I was going off my script here, but I'll return back to it. But do you ever wonder why users abandon your sign up workflow? Sessions let you watch these real interactions, like having someone hover over a button but never clicking. Maybe the button's too small, maybe the color isn't clear. Heat maps can show what's getting attention and what's being ignored, helping you get a make data-backed design improvements. So that's a great um, way. It's a little not. It's definitely not intrusive, because the people you're testing and observing usually don't know that they're being tested and watched. Again, I felt a little odd replaying somebody's recording of how they used a software. I think it was on Full Story. I've heard of some other softwares, but you're really just opening up a screen recording of of where their mouse was, what they were clicking, and sometimes you'll see people actually read with their cursor as if they're pointing at a newspaper or something. They're reading it, and they'll scroll down, they'll skip all of this content that you worked hard on adding. They'll skip all the way to the bottom, and it kind of gives you some insight into what is the person actually looking for. They just jumped on my marketing site, skipped all of my marketing content, but they went straight to booking a demo. Okay, so maybe this person already knew about our product, or maybe they don't like reading and they just want to talk to somebody. And those are some some insights that you might be able to gather from that type of testing. And so this is best for discovering problems or problem areas on your page, understanding where a user struggles, and identifying those abandoned processes, which actually I'll touch on lastly, the drop-off analysis. Understanding and seeing when people are quitting. If you have a workflow that is, maybe essential to the core of your software, and you notice that on this step, there's a 5-step process, and on step 3, 50% of people are quitting, or they're going back a page, or they're taking a really long time on this one step. Something about that step is blocking the user, or making the user so frustrated that they completely abandon the process entirely. So those are just really good, really good insights to find. So again, I think I'm just referring back to the full list of these user tests: usability testing, A/B testing, surveys, feedback forms, and analytics. So how can you start user testing, even if you're just a small team, or if it's just you building something small, or just you building something big? Here are some ways to start user testing as a developer. You can run simple tests. Just ask a friend or a colleague to complete a task. One of those very simple usability tests, where you just give someone a task, watch them perform it, see how they do it, understand the way they're thinking. Maybe that differs from how you think. And that ties into being open-minded and curious. Everyone thinks differently. What makes sense to you might not make sense to others. So if I know as a developer, I know this is how I would complete this task. If I'm looking for a product on an e-commerce site, I know that I like to go to the search bar. But watching someone else try to find the same product, they might be searching in different ways. They might be going straight to the brand and searching through products, or they might be doing it. They might be searching, filtering a different way, using um, the sort by cheapest to most expensive filter all the time. That just gives you a different insight into how people think and operate. And so you don't want to take it personally. Take your findings with a grain of salt. No one gets it right on the first iteration. So just because someone isn't using your product or service the way you want them to, that shouldn't deter you from continuing to improve it. Um, don't be stubborn in your designs. That's something that I've always tried to stay true to. I love when people don't use it the way I'm expecting because that teaches me more about the person and who I'm building it for. I never want the user to feel forced into a behavior or a process that they're not comfortable with. Everything ideally should be natural, and these user testing mechanisms are a way to learn how a person acts naturally. So that concludes my spiel on user testing. If anybody has any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Krista, how do you deal with, like, we hear this all the time, and I'm sure every developer hears the same thing. It's like the client will say, well, my customers, they're not very tech savvy. And my usual comeback is, well, do they have email? Do they have Facebook? All right. They're all tech savvy, or savvy enough. But where I'm going is the client, not the developer, but the client will say, my users are not tech savvy. They don't know how to do this. This has got to be really, really simple, blah, blah, blah. And I almost think that the client doesn't really know his user, at least not his user as far as using a computer goes. Like they underestimate them, and and I don't think the client always knows really precisely the I don't want to say the user story, but what the user actually needs in to some degree. I'll be
Mhm.
gentle in saying that. Is that
Yeah.
like what I'm getting? I guess what I'm asking is, if I just get the feedback from the client, how do I combat that? Because sometimes it seems like that information is wrong.
Yeah, and so I faced that before, and they'll say, "This is my demographic of users," and there are a bunch of I've heard this specifically before as a real anecdote. My users are all like middle-aged soccer moms. They don't know how to use
Yeah, yeah,
technology. So
yeah.
how do we make this look fun and simple and whatever? And so what I try to think about is what are middle-aged soccer moms using on the internet? Probably maybe a little Candy Crush, a little Facebook here and there. Um, I want to try to relate my designs to what they're already used to because it's very I would say it's pretty rare to find somebody who is truly tech illiterate. Tech is everywhere. We're surrounded by it. So chances are even the most untech savvy person is familiar with some websites or some softwares, and there are affordances that they've learned from those softwares. So understanding that the three lines, the three bars, that means menu, and that'll usually come at the top left. Some of those affordances are just learned through using these different websites. And so again, I'm trying to understand what are the users um, probably used to, and so what other applications are they using? Um, and if I can't find my answer from that line of thought, then maybe I'm asking the client again, what are they actually struggling with? Like, how can we define this at a top level problem? They might say they're taking too long, and that's why they're not That's why they're not tech savvy, is because they take forever to do this thing. And so I'll take that feedback and say, okay, why is it taking them a long time? Is it because they're tech illiterate, or is it because something is actually kind of hard to find and it kind of hard to to work through? So maybe I'll that might be a case where I would ask to talk to a user, have a one-on-one usability session, and just ask that user, hey, can you show me how you do this process? Watch them do it, and I would say, oh, they are taking a long time, but that's because the software is just really slow. Like the user's not doing anything wrong. And so, just from those tests, you might discover a different issue, or maybe you'll find the same problem as the client has told you, but you might find the problem to be rooted by a different cause than what you've been told initially.
How effective can you test something before you build it?
Sorry, say again?
Like, how effective can you test something before you build it? I know we've done testing where we've just taken a mock, like either a what do you call it, prototype in Figma, or even just a drawing, and then ask people about the interface. And that seems to unveil, a reasonable amount of issues. I don't know if anybody in the community does that usually, because most of us don't really work by a blueprint. Some of the bigger companies will have designers, but that's about it. So is there anything that a developer who, let's say, if they're a dev house, 1 to 3 people, they probably don't have a UX person. And is there any way they can test their ideas out before building in some fashion?
Yeah, like I said here, you can just ask a friend or a colleague to test it for you. Maybe someone who's not super familiar with the product. But just getting, 5 people's opinions is infinitely better than having no people's opinions. So I would say even if you're starting small, you can still make some big changes, and they don't have to be massive, you know, game-changing changes. Like even though this is an example, this kind of illustrates how something simple can make a significant difference. I read about an anecdote about Instagram, and it's obviously Instagram has tons and tons of resources to test, but it was about them introducing short form instant or short form uh, disappearing content, or they called it temporary content or something. And they because that was kind of taking off. I think this was when Snapchat was at its height and Snapchat was making stories and stuff. And so Instagram wanted to kind of ride that same wave, and they were testing um, the where those Instagram stories should live on the app. And I think they just did some testing between should it be in the menu here or should it be at the top of the screen here? And they found obviously that at the very top of your home screen, it has the greatest engagement. So these changes don't have to be massive. So if you're just testing 5 people, you might come to that same conclusion. You don't have to test. You don't have to wait to test 100 people to make some data-driven decisions. So start small is better than not starting at all, I'd say.
Can they, so for the just going back, for dev houses that don't have designers, is there any way they can test something out without having to physically build it? Like we can build stuff in FileMaker really quick, right?
Mhm.
We can move around buttons and things like that. And we can also make things really ugly really quick as well. But is there any way they can maybe test prior to that? Like
Mhm.
like if I use balsamic, which is kind of a really rough markup, or whimsical is what I use,
Mhm.
is that good enough to test some actual workflows, or do I need to sort of build something out a little bit to get the hands on?
I think so. I definitely think that you don't have to build the fully fleshed out version before you test it. And that might come from building a specific part of the full product and testing that. So kind of testing just smaller scale tests of something that you built, you could prototype something. I've prototyped pretty easily in Figma. I'm also, I use Figma every day, so that's a little easier for me. But um, using, like you said, Whimsical and creating these maybe wireframes just to illustrate the concept of a task. And I'll go back to that e-commerce idea where, hey, can you find this product? How would you do that on this site? So even if you have a wireframe of an e-commerce site, of a, like, just online shopping, you have the representation of this rectangle is a search bar, this is the side navigation, and these squares everywhere are products. It's all grayscale, doesn't matter. It's all just shapes. But it puts that user into the mindset of something that they're familiar with, because that's such uh, a common site. They'll understand when you ask them, how would you find a product? They'll say, well, yeah, I guess, yeah, what I would do is I would probably go to this search bar, or, I would probably click this product and I would expect a bunch of related products to appear underneath. So, putting the user into that mindset of something that they're familiar with can still give you a lot of insights into something that might help you in your product. So I would say, yeah, prototyping, small scale, or simulating an environment that a user can give idea or give insights into, or it's a little more time consuming and maybe a little more arts and craftsy than what than what we're used to as developers and designers and stuff. But paper prototyping is a very useful mechanism that I've used when I was in school, where I was literally drawing on paper, and sometimes even cutting pieces out and adding interactions with paper just to show, here's how it would look on a computer. So I might have, let's say that I have like a carousel image slider. And so that would be like 5 images in a row that are cut off by the screen that you can scroll through horizontally. So I might have had something like that on paper, and I would have an 8.5 by 11 sheet, and then I would have like a long cutout that I would slip into two cut slits in my paper. I might be explaining this a little weird, but physically pulling a piece of paper across another piece of paper to show them this is how the interaction would look on a screen. Something like that. It's a little arts and craftsy, but that's another quick and cheap, simple way to test something.
Right. I pulled Full Story up if you want to.
Sure.
I can show people here just quick. So this is one of the softwares that Pearson was talking about. Full Story is it's a paid application, but you can get a free trial that lasts. It'll last, depending on how busy your traffic is on your app or site, it'll last you anywhere from a few days to maybe even the whole month. This is on our marketing page here, and so these are sessions from, I think I've got it's from February and January, and these are just different times and things. And let me just go back and find one that's a little juicier, because some sessions are just quick in and out. And let's go back here. So here's a session here. You can see there's 25 events. An event is like an interaction between the user and the app. No personal information is recorded. It's just, this is actually technically the same information that you get by looking at your logs in your system. So you can see here's a user here, and there's their mouse there. And they actually started to play a podcast there, and then you can get an idea where they're pausing. And this is what Pearson was saying. Let's see if they do some reading. Some people are. So he's clicking on that. That opened up another link, and it gives you sort of a real kind of an idea of how erratic people are jumping around on your site. They literally, this is sped up a little bit. I think there's skipping breaks. I think it might be turned on. Skipping activity, yeah. So it's slightly faster than normal. While they're moving their mouse, it's real time, and then the pauses are reduced. So they had a quick look there. You'd be amazed at how many people scope out people's faces. This looks like it's fairly old. And it gives you a real good insight about like what are people actually looking at on the site and how much they jump around? And we all do this. So you can, you can see hundreds of sessions. They all have very similar behavior. So, and I think that's it for that one. So that was that person's experience kind of thing. There's a few other programs that are like this. Hotjar is another one. And we use another one that's a little bit more designed for software applications called Gainsight. And it allows you to, we don't really use it to its potential, but it allows you to interact with the user. Like after they've done something or if they haven't used a certain feature, you can pop a dialog box up and say, hey, we noticed you haven't used the rollback feature. Here's how you could use it. And that's kind of a neat piece of software as well.
So you would use this just as well within your FM BetterForms apps?
Yeah. This is the marketing one. But we also have it. We have it on a few other things here as well. A few other apps. But our IDE, we have it on that, and that's just mostly to inspect new features. It's not actually in our main, it's in our staging branch, I believe. And we also have it in one of our other products. So it doesn't matter. This because this is a BetterForms page. Doesn't really matter though. It can be any type of web page. It's just a CDN link that you pop in the top and then in your DOM header insertions, and you're good to go.
Albert had a question in the chat.
Hmm.
He asked, Charles, what changes did you make after viewing these full stories?
Oh, yeah. Broken stuff for starters, broken links. Let me see if I can find one that you can have an actual legit takeaway here. Let me go back here and we'll just go. This is some random stuff here. The software, by the way, if you did have any payment gateways and things, it obfuscates that right away. Here's one that's a few interactions. You'll see a lot of bots, and what the bots just load the page. They have no mouse movement. And you'd be amazed at how many times people will be on the page for 2 or 3 hours because they're, sit back at their desk, they go for lunch, they surf for some more, they go back through things. They don't always click through stuff. The mouses go over the top of the pages. So one of the things is you can just get it, and you can do this by Google Analytics as well. You get an idea of which pages should be more forefront, which pages should we drop into this drop downs here. All right, so that was something that's changed. I think we have 2 drop downs now, maybe. Right. Pricing is almost always something that people go back to right away, constantly going back and forth between pricing, and then they look at some stuff, they go back to the pricing. What we noticed, the biggest takeaway that we noticed on our site is people are, or at least our users, this is not the general public because we are legitimately a little bit more tech savvy than the average person, is they want technical content. They don't want something that's super, super simplified. Like if I use Calendly a lot. If I was to look at Calendly's website here, it's pretty simplified. Very, very small, not much to compare. It's like, yeah, okay, got it. It's just a calendar booking app. I'm not making a technical investment here, right? I'm not training my team on something on technology. So it's relatively light. So this one does have a little bit more information. And really, honestly, we could probably use about 3 times as much because it does get read. So, hope that answers your question. Alrighty, pause this. We're going to jump over to Andrew, who's going to feature a cool technique.
Thank you, Charles. I am really excited to share this one. We live in an age where everybody is using mobile phones. They're working with data, especially offline. And when you're working with offline data, you often have a lot of data on your device that you need to filter through because you don't want to go and fetch that data again. Everything should kind of be on the device and ready to use. So there's often cases where you're working with thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lines of JSON, and you need a way to display this effectively, efficiently. And I ran across a technique called virtual scrolling, which I'm going to share today. And I did create an example, which is public in our examples database for anyone to reference the code. So I have a table here, very basic table, has 2 fields, a name and value, and it has 50,000 records, or 50,000 lines of of rows that I'm generating randomly whenever we come to the page. And just to showcase, if I refresh the page, this is how long it's going to take to render those 50,000 lines of JSON. So nope, I did a little refresh there. But yeah, you'll see that's super slow. And maybe your user, okay, well, the first time it loads, it'll be fast, and then I can use it. Well, that's not true, because let's say I want to sort this column. That's how long it takes to sort the table. So it's unusable, and there has to be a better way. And the reason it takes so long is because you're rendering all 50,000 lines in your DOM. And if you know anything about DOM manipulation, it's slow, it's inefficient. And the goal is, how can we reduce the size of the DOM while still giving users the access to other information? Well, there's a few ways to go about that. One is maybe you don't show all the information. Maybe you have it in pages or pagination, for example. And that's a good technique. And I'm sure if you use like table 2 and those kind of things, you've ran across those paginations. It's like, the pages, and you can kind of filter. But I want to show off an example called virtual scrolling. And virtual scrolling is the idea of, and I have an example here. You'll see I have the normal table, which is visible, and my virtual scrolling table, which is currently hidden. But I'll just go over the code real quick. Here's your normal table. In your normal table, you'll see I'm just looping over my array. I showed the 2 values, and then I have some sorting logic up here, which you can more or less ignore. But this is it. This is the whole table body, these few lines of code. So very simple. But for the virtual scrolling, it's not as different, but there's some cool things to take note here. Number one is this scrolling listener. And this essentially will fire whenever you scroll the page or scroll the table, and it'll update 2 values. It'll update your start index and your end index. And the values in which it sets to is variable based off, the size of your table, how many rows you have, the size of your rows, stuff like that. All you really have to change is, one, how tall is your table, so the height of your table. So these 2 values for the height of your table, and then the height of your row. And you can find this out by just going to your application, opening the inspector, that, and then just like hovering over one of your rows, and you see how slow it is just trying to do this. It's impossible, but that's how you would find the height of your row. Anyways, I set the row, and this is how slow it's going to be if you're working with this amount of data. But let's see if I can get back to my page here, so I'm making some changes. Here we are. Okay, so yeah, so the scroll listener gets set here, updates the start index, end index, and all you have to do is change your v4 to only render the rows in between your start index and your end index, and that's it. And then what's going to happen is, let's make the change and go to the page, and let's compare the difference. So I'll hit save, and there you go. You notice how fast that loaded there, almost instantaneous. It still feels like a normal table, except the only rows that's rendered in the DOM right now are the ones that are visible on the screen, with some buffer on the edges. Because if I scroll really fast, I want to see the rows still being rendered on the bottom. I want it to feel like a normal table, except the only things being rendered are the ones visible on the screen. So that's a huge win. On top of that, let's say I wanted to sort the table. If I hit, for example, the name button, it feels just like a normal table. It feels like you're not working with 50,000 lines of JSON. So this is a big win. And in fact, let's now go to my inspector and see how much faster that opened up. You see that these are the only rows that are being rendered in the DOM. So those 50,000 lines of rows is now maybe a couple dozen. And this is a big win. So, and you see, let me see if I can get this working here. If I did this, there we go. And you see, as I scroll, my rows here are updating. The ones that are old actually get removed from the DOM, and the ones that are new get added to the bottom of the DOM. Vice versa. If I scroll upwards, the ones on the bottom get removed, and the ones on top get inserted. So it feels just like a normal table, super fast, super performant, and is, I would say, necessary for working with anything larger than a couple thousand lines of rows there. So this example is public, so give it a try. I would recommend not switching it over to the normal table, because it's way too slow. And I think the changes you have to make is quite simple to get that into your table.
So I think there's other benefits there too, because since you don't have all these items in the DOM, and this is a common technique, if you don't have all these items in the DOM, that means it's also not taking up system memory as well. Everything you render in the DOM, especially like photos and things like that, are going to take up some overhead. So if you had a bunch of photos in a row, photos in each row, then those photos have to get swapped into memory or added in memory. And if you have 50,000 photos, that's quite a few on an app. And now you could effectively lazy load those in as you scroll as well. So that's pretty cool.
Awesome.
Browser's super optimized for images, right? So originally, you know, the development of the web was designed not so much images as the file type, but the fact that there's this file that you're going to download. So you can visit virtually any page, go to Google Images, you see all kinds of thumbnails and so on. So it's really, really efficient at pulling down files. And your local device is really efficient at receiving those files and rendering them or doing whatever you want to post-processing. S3 is not actually all that fast at serving images or serving files. I'll say files, not images, but it's not super fast, but it's so much faster. It's orders of magnitude faster than what we need. So it's okay in this case. If you wanted to serve images even faster, you'd throw it in front of a CDN, like Cloudflare in front of that. Going backwards now, since the data coming out of S3 is already a JSON, I'll call it a blob, a bunch of data, just a JSON object or a JSON array. That data doesn't have to be assembled, right? So that means I'm not fetching any records. It's already been collected or collated. Getting it into the bucket is relatively fast. It's a little bit slower because you got to push it up from FileMaker and egress out of a file, depending on your FileMaker server, may not be crazy fast. But the real bottleneck is FileMaker's finding all of those files. So that means you have to go visit every one of those records and pull that data, you know, and if you know that if you are on a list view or a detail view in FileMaker and you slide the slider across, 20,000 records, 1 second, 2 seconds, depending on your database, then that record appears, right? Now we're having to gather every one of those records, put them all into a package and send it out the door. Also, the exit of FileMaker, whether it's coming out of the data API or the XML gateway, and we don't really see a huge difference in performance there with the way that we access that data. That ends up being a little bit slower as well. If you're using the XML gateway, there's a conversion from XML from FileMaker goes into XML. There's some conversion time into that. There's conversion time in the BetterForms cloud to convert it out of XML, but it's only in the order of or under 10 milliseconds or so. And then streaming that data back as well. Now, going back, so those are all the bottlenecks. Going back into streaming and that aspect absolutely could do something like that. In this particular case, they needed to have the data all offline, available offline. So that wasn't an option. But you can fetch a section of records. Give me record 100 to 200. And then as I scroll, go and do a call in the background, and I'm showing, say, 50 records, and I have an overhang of 25 on each side. And then as I scroll, I maybe make that call. That's a very common technique as well for it's like a paginated request kind of an idea. So that's okay too, but again, it's not offline, right? So the main advantage here is that if he's fetching one huge blob, there is one extra moving part, which is that bucket. But it's pretty easy. You can make a post. You can do an insert from URL directly. If you didn't want to have any wrapper or boilerplate around it, you can do that in 2 lines. Actually, you can do it in 1 line from a container field to post in with get pre-signed URL custom function. So it's pretty efficient to push it up into S3, and then it's just a link to get it back down again. So it's not really a ton of overhead, although you have to configure a bucket in S3, which is brutal. I think that's probably the hardest thing anybody's ever worked with AWS. It's absolutely terrible. And if you're looking for a SaaS idea, all you have to do is have an app that can pre-configure a bucket from a wizard. You'd be a millionaire, right? Because anybody who's done that, it's the most terrible experience.
just offload it to someone else to do it. Cool. Thanks, Charles. Thanks for explaining all that. Very cool. Very great presentation, by the way. Thanks.
That's pretty cool. Andrews, was it back to me still or no? Are we back here?
Up to you.
All right, just a second.
I just have a quick question. Just I'm unfamiliar with all the offline stuff. So obviously when you first load it, you just have to be connected to the internet. But then anytime you visit that URL, it's just gonna pull it up because it doesn't. When does it refresh? Like I guess there's a refresh button, and that's when it refreshes the cache from the browser side.
You want to handle that? Or
What
you want
would
to take it, Andrew? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, so are you talking about like refreshing the data, so getting I guess new changes back from your system, or you're saying like how is that data getting pulled back up into your device?
Yeah, so like if I'm using that app, then I need to be online, connect to that URL to originally pull it all in, right?
Yeah.
And then if I'm not connected to the internet, it doesn't matter. I still go to that URL and then it's just there. But then
Yes.
what's gonna trigger more information coming in? Is it just that button? Is that the only thing that can trigger a refresh on the cache?
That depends. So it's all going to depend on how you're fetching your data. Now this can be triggered manually. Let's say a button click that hits sync, for example. That's going to cause some kind of process that gets the new data from your backend and updates the cache. That's one method. That doesn't have to be a manual process. You can work. We advise a method that essentially checks whether or not the device is online. And if it happens to come online, we kind of see, well, we'll do kind of two processes. One is, has there been any changes from the backend that needs to be updated? And obviously has been any changes from your device that needs to be updated into the backend. So it's kind of a two-way process there. And this can happen automatically. We have a way to check whether or not you're connected to the internet, right? For example, in your browser, you have a way of like, I think it's window dot, what's the online?
There's a few different ways. We have something built into BetterForms, but
Anyways,
checking
yeah,
for online and offline is tricky.
there's a way to do it from the console. However, it's not exactly great because even if it says it's online here, you might not be connected to the internet, for example. For example, let's say you're connected to a router that had no internet access. It'll still say you're online, even though you have no access to your server. So doing it this way is not the most secure method, even though it works here because I'm totally offline. The better way to check whether or not you're offline or even connected to your server is just hit your API endpoint. Just go to your app, go /API, hit enter, and if you are online, it should return some data. This is built into BetterForms itself. All your apps will have an API endpoint. And this is a great way to check, hey, is my app connected to my FileMaker server? Because if it is, then you can do whatever process you need to do. So we have a little script, and I don't know if I can pull it up here. Here it is. Anyways, going back to what I was showing here, if you hit /API and go to your domain, you should receive some kind of data back from your FileMaker server. If you do, you know you're online. You can do whatever sync process you need to do. And the way we do this automatically is we actually go and create a function. I have a function here called trigger utility hook, and gets called whenever any kind of utility hook gets ran from my page. This is kind of like a pre-screener to say, hey, am I online? And if I am online, let's actually run the hook. And in here, it's actually checking two things. One, is my device even connected to any kind of internet source? Is Navigator online? That's the one I showed you in the, that's the one I want to show you in the console here. If I go to, let's say, some app, let's go to this app. And if you go into your console and type navigator.online, navigator online. This is a great way to see, is my device connected to any kind of internet source? It can be true. If I go to an offline and do the same thing, it says false. That's kind of the first screening. Is my device even online? And that's also a good way to branch whether or not, okay, is it my device that's offline, or is it my FileMaker server that's offline? Because those are kind of two different issues, and maybe we want to display different error messages that way. But yeah, number one, are we online? And if so, attempt to run a fetch on your /API endpoint. Because if that has some kind of response, you kind of know that, okay, my FileMaker server is online. I can now walk through the sync process or whatever and kind of process you need to do, and obviously run your hook. So that's one way to do it automatically, is anytime your device goes online, check if there's been any changes. If there have been, you can do the updates, and then the user never has to click any kind of sync button anymore. This is useful for, I guess, small changes. If you envision larger changes, maybe you want it to be a manual process for the user kind of visually see some of the loading state that's happening. This is more of a UX thing than anything, depending on how you want to deliver this information to your
Is that like on
user.
a timer?
It's not on a timer. The way we trigger this is anytime any hook gets fired. So let's say I need to go fetch some data, right? Am I online? It's gonna run this. Or let's say I need to save something. Am I online? Let's run this, right? So it's not on a timer per se. It's whenever the user triggers some sort of action that's gonna require some backend information, some save, some fetch, something like that. So when I say automated, it's not automated in the sense that it's checking every 5-10 seconds. It's automated in the sense of whenever the user attempts an action that's going to require some backend information, then we trigger it, if that makes sense.
And then also, can you actually check? So maybe it's online, but it's like a really bad signal. Do you test for that at all? If it's like a low quality signal, then it's not worth
Yeah, so
trying.
that's a good question. You can. It's not the best for this scenario because let's say you're on a bad connection and you run the hook and the hook takes a while to come back, but then you go offline during the process where it's trying to come back. That would trigger a timeout, right? That would say, hey, you went to go get something, now you're offline and you're gonna time out on that hook process. There are other ways around that. For example, Firebase is a database that's really good at detecting or resuming and stopping whenever the user kind of loses a connection, right? That's a great method or a database to use if you need to essentially stream. Maybe Charles can talk more about that. But if that's the case, I would recommend a button to trigger it because the button would only be pressed when the user has some kind of good connection, right? If they are fearful that they're gonna have a spotty connection and they don't want to get stuck in a process that's gonna take too long, I would say manually press the button. That makes the most sense to me. Or even force the user to be in some kind of offline state while they're using the app, and then when they come back online, they can switch it back to an online state and then use it as normal. That's kind of my recommendations for that.
So something that we didn't really mention, but this all 100% applies to FileMaker Go too. Meaning, if you wanted to grab 20,000 records or however many records from into FileMaker Go, and the person's only going to be online, I don't know, in between subway stations or something like that for a brief period of time, that would be really hard to build that sync and have it work really well, right? You're basically doing some kind of table import, waiting for all of the records coming. It's kind of flaky. But you can use a BetterForms endpoint, and it doesn't have to be BetterForms endpoint. Auto has a bit of an endpoint you can use as well, although the BetterForms one's a little bit more flexible for a number of reasons, which I can gladly talk about. You can just do a quick call, right? Insert from URL from FileMaker Go, grab all of that JSON blob, and then post-process it on the device. You can say, okay, I've got it all. It looks all intact. Now I'm done my connection. That connection only lasts for a couple of seconds, and you grab thousands and thousands, like literally tens of thousands of records. So incredibly efficient that way by putting the data into one object and transferring it that way. The other thing that Andrew had mentioned there as well is, sorry, to address your point, Brad, is every use case is different. Like, when do you sync? When do you not sync? When do you, like, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense? It makes sense for this particular app to do it that way. But if I had an app that's like an app that's at a conference, like Claris Engage, for example, and I wanted to be able to jump in and out of bandwidth and not necessarily grab all of the data to kind of mostly work offline, it might be a different workflow. It might be, I might push a message in to that device, and if that device responds, maybe then it goes and fetches data or something. It might be some kind of other type of topology there.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Well, yeah, any other questions? Because there are, I guess, two other things I have to show here. But Charles, if you wanted to hop in and show something first, then you can take the spotlight.
Let me just see. Yeah, maybe I'll just touch base just really, really quick on just slightly off script, but on the same topic, and we can have some more Friday lives on this stuff. So what we found is we introduce a feature, and the feature doesn't get used for a few years, believe it or not. Like it's not like everybody's just all over that feature. We added the data API, for example. It didn't get used. It didn't take the majority of uses to FileMaker connections for 3 years since we added it in. The first 2 years, hardly anybody even used it. Everybody wanted it, but nobody used it. We added messaging. So we were starting to see people use messaging. We don't see hardly anybody using push notifications. And we haven't seen anybody use our streaming API yet. But there's a few other services that we've added. So PWAs we're starting to see people use now, though. We are starting to see actual apps getting built with that. And that's something that we introduced a couple of years ago. And the next big thing I think we're going to start to see is what's called local first. And local first design is basically the idea of building an app. You've heard of mobile first, which is when you build something that's responsive and designed for mobile screen, and then you extend that out into the rest of the display ecosystem. Local first is you're basically building an app to have all the data local. And the fundamental difference, I'll share my screen here just really, really quick, and then I'm going to flip it back to Andrew. I'm going to draw on your face here, Andrew. I'm going to draw on the screen. Sorry about that. But the main difference is you have your database up in the cloud here, FMS. And normally we have our device sitting here. That's our device. And there we go. Now it's an iPhone. And I'm pushing the data into the browser, and that's it. Local first is a slightly different approach. I'll make my phone a little bit bigger. We push the data from the cloud into a local database, and then that goes into your display. All right, which is almost the same as what Andrew's done there. There's a few different strategies we have built into BetterForms already. Andrew mentioned them already a couple of times. We have local caching in session storage and in local storage, which are two mechanisms that are, I wouldn't say permanent. They can be evicted. Basically the data stays in the browser. There's another mechanism. It's called cookies as well, as everybody probably knows about. And then Andrew's going to touch base on IndexedDB, and that's another mechanism. It's an actual it's a database that's built into the browser. And the advantage of that is IndexedDB is it's permanent. There's lots of wrappers and things that are built around it. It's a very grassroots sort of database, so it's a little bit ugly to use as far as an interface or an API, but there are some wrappers around that. One of them Andrew mentioned earlier was Firestore. Firestore, and that's a commercial product by Google that can use IndexedDB underneath. And then another one is just a wrapper on that is Dexy, which I think Andrew is going to be talking a little bit about. But that's the gist of local first, is you're effectively just designing your app to be local. The data is local, so it's super performant, and taking that approach and then letting the slower stuff, the synchronizing to the cloud, happen in the background or happen periodically and not be as forefront. It's not sort of hook first, which is what BetterForms sort of is. It's just taking a different approach and calling the hooks later on. So that being said, I'll flip this back over to Andrew, because so I don't hog up all of the time here.
Yeah, so I'll display some cool techniques using IndexedDB. We work on and Charles mentioned we use a wrapper called DexiDB. We found it's a pretty lightweight, efficient use of IndexedDB. I was gonna create an example for this, but I woke up this morning and realized my example is totally not working. So I asked one of our clients to use his app for demo. So you get to see, an actual real use case of DexiDB there. Let me show off this app real quick. So this is an app called DHX Deliver. It's a delivery app where there's routes, and then they can take notes and pictures of the route. Pretty simple there. It's not launched yet, but it's something in the works. This is an app by Angel City Data. I'm working with Jake Johnson on this project, and he's thankfully given me the green light to show off a few techniques here. So the main thing I want to show off here is the use of the IndexedDB if you go into your console and hit the application tab, you can actually see the IndexedDB in your storage section here. And I don't know if you guys can see that well because I know my screen's a little. Let me zoom in. There we go.
That's not bad.
And then you'll see there's my indexed database. This is initialized in my onAppload. Maybe I can show that off a bit here. The onAppload is a named action that gets fired whenever your app loads. So super useful for initializing any kind of database such as this one. You'll see I'm already named action called initialize the database. So let me go trace that down. There it is. And this is it. We're going to call one more thing you have to do is obviously in your DOM header insertions, grab your IndexedDB script and put it into your DOM header. This will initialize a library to be used in your application. But once you do that, you can come here and create your database, define your database. So, what fields are you going to be storing? In this case, it's just ID, the data, the type, and then some ID entity that is going to tie this to a record. Do some error trapping, and then assign it to the window. Because we send it to the window because you're going to lose context of what DB is once you leave this named action. So by putting it in the window, you have access to use this in any function that you have in your application. And this is it to initialize the database. Just really 3 lines of code with some error trapping there. And then let's see how it's used in a real use scenario. So let's go to maybe this note here. 16 days ago, there's an add photos button. I'm going to click this button and hopefully I have some photos I can display here. BetterForms test files. I have a nice folder of dummy images I can use for testing. It's great, bunch of animals, horses, stuff like that. So why don't we upload this picture of a bird, and how about a picture of a rabbit? Boom. So notice there's no uploading time. There's no downloading, saving time. All that's happening is we're taking the binary data of the photo and inserting it right into the database. In fact, if you go into inspect and go into the DB, and you'll see actually a few are in here already. But there's my IndexedDB table. There's my photos table. There's the ID key, and then the data you'll see is in an array buffer. Now, it doesn't have to be an array buffer. The data field can be IndexedDB can support multiple different types of file types or file storage types. For example, binary or blobs, stuff like that. In this case, we're using an array buffer, but it doesn't have to be exactly this method. But the data is being stored in the DB, and then it can be fetched as you see here and displayed as a blob essentially. And it's super performant. I can delete it. I can add more. Let's add a bunch here just to demonstrate. What if I added 4 plus 10-ish? There it is. It kind of goes into my app very fast.
Nice.
This app is meant to be used on a mobile device. So let me go to mobile device so I can show off some some scrolling here. There we go. And let's remove a few of these. I don't want these. And let's save. Super fast. None of this is being obviously saved to your FileMaker server yet or any kind of database S3s. But when you run some kind of sync process, at that point in time, you can push data into S3, for example, into your containers, stuff like that. But if you just need an offline photo taking mechanism that's going to sync later, this is a fantastic method, super performant, super fast, and is I think a critical strategy for any kind of offline app that needs to upload or take photos.
How is the database different than the cache?
The difference is that it's a lot easier to retrieve data out of an IndexedDB because obviously it's indexed and it's there's ID keys that you can just do like a find, for example. It's hard to do a find in your cache local storage, but doing a find in this environment is a lot better. Which is why we use Dexy, for example, because Dexy gives you some methods because it's just a wrapper for the IndexedDB. So if you want to do a find or like a delete or a push, those methods are all handled by the library, which is a lot easier than trying to do that through your cache storage.
You can think of cache like the local storage, or what it says, cache in browser, cache in tab. Those are really effectively just memory. So it's caching that, or it's saving that entire memory as a JSON object, almost like a container, like we were talking about earlier, but it's saving it to local storage. It's not a database in the sense of a database allows you to or sort, it allows you to search, as Andrew said, um, all the things that databases do. So that's the main difference. You could actually just save everything into one record if you wanted as well. But in this case, you may want to be able to do some post-processing. Like, I think if you were using this with the 50,000 records, for example, you might want to do a find on those 50,000 records, or you might want to or sort them and order them. And a lot of that stuff you can do in JavaScript, but the database allows you to manipulate individual records as well, I guess.
Charles and Andrew, as far as like the system performance of the device and the memory allocation, is one more efficient in using memory space than the other? The cache versus IndexedDB?
Yeah, IndexedDB uses your device storage. So first of all, local storage can only go up to 10 megabytes on Chrome and 5 megabytes approximately on iOS, and that is shared amongst the domain, and it can be evicted. So your device could kick that data out, and it does happen if you have a lot of devices. Not everybody uses it for apps, but web apps tend to use it. Whereas IndexedDB can use up to a percentage. I think it's like 95% or something like that on Android, and it's supposed to be about the same on iOS, but I haven't run into this myself, but they say that on iOS, you have to pre-allocate that space and then you can't get any more, but I've never actually experienced that. But it uses the drive space of your device, which is gigabytes now rather than
Okay.
gigabytes.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you.
And since it's gigabytes, that means you can have gigabytes of, well, all the photos that are in your device already. You can literally have that much in data. So it's pretty powerful that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks.
Cool. I guess the last thing I want to touch on here is notice how I got to this screen here. This is a very useful way to see how your app is going to look on a mobile device. If you use Chrome or any kind of browser, click on this little button up here, and you can choose, have it be responsive. You can kind of check how your app responds to different screen sizes, or even check what's the size of an iPhone 14 Pro Max. So very nice way to see how your app is going to look on a device. However, there's a catch to this. This doesn't have the toolbars that a lot of mobile browsers are going to have, right? So when I'm looking at this screen, there's no toolbar here. But if I go to an actual app, why don't I show this off here? I wonder if it's working. Is it working? Yeah, here we go. I'm on my phone here, which I'm streaming to my desktop. Notice how this toolbar is totally covering the bottom of my text here. That's not something that the Chrome window is gonna display. So when you're testing your applications, make sure you actually test on a device, because there might be things that you'll miss, little layout glitches, stuff like that. And there is a trick around this. I have a little example here that I've created. Let's see if I can find it. Andrew. Yeah. So for example, here's the same app on my screen. However, with no toolbar, it looks totally fine. But when your users I don't know if you ever run into this problem using your device, trying to, sign up for something, trying to scroll down, and you can never get to the bottom button to hit sign up or something. That's the problem, is people don't actually try this on their own devices. The trick around this is, do I even have my app open anymore? Let me see. Here it is. Okay. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with using HScreen. HScreen is honestly pre-added into a lot of our templates here. This is a bit outdated now, and actually the better way to do this is actually to use HDVH. You might ask, what is this? Well, if you go to Tailwind's documentation, go to height, you see HScreen is 100 VH. VH stands for viewport height, and it's basically the height of your entire device, which is great. However, it doesn't count for the size of the toolbar on the mobile browsers. So instead, I recommend to use 100 DVH, which stands for dynamic viewport height. And the benefit of doing DVH is that it actually accounts for the toolbar. If it's visible, it'll actually shrink the size of your height. If there's no toolbar, actually expand. So it's actually dynamic in that way. There's some other ones like LVH and SVH. LVH meaning always take always assume the toolbar is not visible, and then SVH is assumed the toolbar is never visible. So I just recommend to use the simple one DVH, which is dynamic and handles that case. And so let's try it. Let's go into my app, change to DVH, and see if my phone can update here. Save. Aha, okay. So back to my screen. If I scroll down to the bottom, you should now see that the bottom text is no longer covered by the toolbar. Very simple trick. So I recommend if you are working with mobile applications, don't use HScreen anymore. Use HDVH, and it'll save you a lot of headache when it comes to heights and the size of your page.
Cool. Very cool tip. That was awesome, Andrew. Thank you. Thank you. Those are absolutely really, really cool. Like I could keep looking at them all the time. It's really neat because I don't get a chance to always see this stuff. This is the only time I get a chance to see all of these, some of these apps from time to time. I want to test something out here real quick. We're putting together an app for Claris Engage. There is going to be an official app, but this is more for the visionary bar. And we're just in the process of working on it. And last year we featured it, but the dates were a little different. And this is basically what it will look like. You give you an idea here, and it's themed after that, but it's also going to have all of the sessions and the visionary bar stuff in here and so on. So we're really excited about that because it's going to have some really cool features. And one of the features we're looking to put in is a game, which is Pac-Man. So I want to share this link with everybody, and I'm going to paste this in, and I want you to give it a try. And you'll have to turn you'll have your sound on anyway. But I'm pasting it into pasted it into the chat there. And what we're thinking of, this is not fully ported over yet. That's partially ported over. It is running BetterForms. And the main thing here is, I won't do it now because if you're doing it, you'll hear two of them and that'd be annoying. But basically it's Pac-Man. And what we're thinking about doing is having the high scores shared amongst the app, and a bit of a leaderboard and some prizes and things like that as well. So give that a try. Let us know what you think. The port that Hassan had found here has got really accurate audio recordings of everything, all of the sound effects and everything. So it's about the closest port of this game that we found in terms of being accurate. And we think it'll be kind of neat, something to play along with. Did that work for everybody? Is there anybody it doesn't work for?
It's cool looking at the dev tools and opening them up and seeing them all like pixelated kind of in the font.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't it's overriding the fonts. This is kind of a cool font. It's called Ready Player One or something like that, or Ready Player One Start or something like that. Anyway, it's got a funny name to it, but it's a video game, 80s video game font. So if you ever want to add custom fonts, they're pretty easy. You can use GPT and just go into or use our AI assistant, go into your DOM inserts and say, hey, I want to add support for this font. How do I do that? And then you can reference it in your CSS. All right, I'm going to assume. Let us know what you think of that, and if it's if this is the game that we should include or something else. And we're getting close to our time. I'm going to open up our draw here, and just before I do that, and then we'll return back to questions and answers there as well. I'm going to also stop our recording. Thank you everybody for coming out, and we hope to see you next month. Or at Engage. If you are at Engage, come by their booth. We're going to be on the 5th floor. Hassan and I will be at the booth for pretty much the whole day, and then a couple of the team are roaming around, going to sessions and such. All right, we'll see you then.